Welcome back to No BS TS Series 2, Episode 2. And in this one, we're going to talk about the publish and subscribe pattern, or as they call it in the book, the observer pattern, where you observe some data and when it changes, you get called back. Simple as that. So in this one, we are going to take a look first at the architecture of that pattern, and then we're going to go into some basic implementation of it, both in classes and in functions. And then we're going to go build our own state manager in React. And you get to name it, I guess. Whatever you want to name your own state manager. Cool stuff. All right, but before we get into it, I do want to talk about my new book, No BS TS, the book. It's on sale now, and it covers every single episode of this series, including all of the first series where we went from everyday types through generics and tuples and React and all the rest of it. And now we're into design patterns, and every single time a new episode of this series comes out, the book gets updated, and you get a new copy in your mailbox. Exciting stuff. Okay, let's jump right into it. All right, so this is the most simple variant of this pattern. You've got the subscribable object. That subscriber then subscribes that object, and when new events are published, the subscriber gets those events. And of course, you can have multiple subscribers to a single subscribable object. And then you can have a subscribable base class that you then extend with your own functionality, and you can use that subscribable base class to publish events, and subscribers can use it to subscribe to those events. So let's start up by setting up our project. I'm going to create a directory called basic, and then I'm going to go into there, and then I'm going to yarn add TypeScript as well as TS node in development mode. And then I'm going to do npx tsc init to initialize TypeScript for us, and there we go. So the next thing we want to do is create a subscribable class. We're going to start with the class-based variant of this pattern. And I'm going to export a class called subscribable. It's going to have a private list of subscribers. And actually, we're not going to use an array for that. I'm going to use a set. And the reason that I want to use a set is that it safeguards against the same function getting added multiple times. So what do we want our subscriber to look like? So it's going to be a function for sure. It's probably going to return a void. And we'll just start off with a new set here. Now we are getting some complaints, so let's see what that's about. So this is telling us that we need to change the libtarget for our project because early versions of ECMAScript didn't have set. So we need to upgrade our target to ES 2015 or later. So let's go and do that. Swing down here to lib and bring in ES 2015 and also DOM. Okay, it looks like it's happy now. So the next thing I want to do is provide a subscribe function. So just like that, I want to have a subscriber and I want to add that subscriber to that set. Again, GitHub Copilot, great stuff. Now I've seen the pattern before where you get an unsubscribe method, and it also takes the exact same callback. But I gotta say, it's kind of a pain in the butt. What I'd rather do is return a function out of this, and that function is the unsubscribe. So let's return that. And then if you call it, it just deletes the subscriber from that set of subscribers. And then I want a publish method, which is just going to call each one of those subscribers. Now at this point, the message that you're getting back is empty. You're not getting any information out of it. So what we should do instead is provide a message type. So I'm going to make this generic, and we're going to say that this is a message type. And so that callback is going to take a message with that message type. And then down here in the subscriber, also going to add that. And then in here, we need to actually get the message. So when we publish, we have to have the message that we're going to send, and we just drop that in there. So let's now go and write some tests for this. So I'm going to create a new file called class test. And I'm going to import our subscribable from the subscribable class. And then I'm going to create an instance of this subscribable object. And now I want to go and just publish to it. I want to say that this is hello. So we're going to make this a string. And let's try that out. I'm going to say npx ts node and then say class test. And it's not going to do anything because there's nobody listening for the message. So let's go and add a subscriber. In this case, we'll just do console log. I'll run it again, and hey, there you go. Cool. So I can actually go and say, publish a bunch of times. Hello, whatever, goodbye. And let's try it again. There you go. Hello, whatever, and goodbye. And since it's synchronous, right, they all come out in the exact same order. So let's now try out that unsubscribe functionality. So we're returning an unsubscribe function from subscribe. So let's go and grab that. And then right in the middle here, after whatever, I'm going to unsubscribe. And so I shouldn't see goodbye. Let's give it a try. Yeah, perfect. Great. Okay, so how about that variant where I descend from subscribable with my own class and I extend it? Let's try that out. So we'll create a new class called data class that extends subscribable. And we'll say that in this case it's a number. And so I want to start off with a constructor that takes an initial value. And we got to call back the super on that. And then whenever I set that value, I'm going to first set the value. And then I'm going to publish the value out to any subscribers. So let's now go and create a new instance of this with 0. And then I'm going to subscribe to it. In this case, I'll get the value back. And I'll do a little bit more fancy console logging on this, just so we can see it. And then I'll go and set that value to 42. Let's give it a try. And there we go. We get called back whenever that changes. And we can have multiple subscribers on it. And of course, we just need to unsub at the end. But we could also do multiple subscribers. So I could have DC unsub 2 to the second subscriber. That would be DC2. And we'd also unsub at the end. Try it again. And now we get 2 different subscribers listening to the same events. And of course, the data class doesn't care. If you want to listen to it, great. If you don't want to listen to it, that's fine too. Okay, so let's try out the functional variant of this. I'm going to close that out, and then I'm going to copy the subscribable class. And I'm going to go back into BASIC and create a new file again, and we'll call this one subscribable function. So in this case, we're going to turn our class into a function, and we're going to say create subscribable. And we'll have a set of subscribers for that message type. There's no constructor, and we're just going to return an object that has subscribe and publish. Now we have no this, so we just want to use subscribers, which we have right up here. So this is a closure that maintains its own subscriber list, but it's hidden from us, so we can't actually modify it directly. All right, let's try it out. So I'm going to go back over here to class test and copy that, and then create a new file called function test. And we'll get rid of our extension, and then I'm going to go get from function, create subscribable. And here we go. Let's try it out. npx ts node, and then function test.ts. And there you go. And so there you go. You got a function variant of this pattern. Okay, so let's now try and build our own state manager based on this. So I'm going to go create a React app so we have something to play with. Close out these files and go back into the base directory. And then I'm going to create a React app. And we'll call it state manager. And we'll use the template of TypeScript. All right, so let's dig in and start it up. Okay, looking pretty good. So I'm just going to start with the state manager. And I'm just going to call it simple-state-manager.ts. But you know what? If you want to go and take this state manager and make it a npm module, have at it. Use some IKEA name or something like that. Whatever you want to do. So to start this off, I'm going to use the function-based variant of the subscribable. I'm going to paste that in there. And I'm not going to export it because we want to kind of hide that implementation. I'm going to close out this file. And so what we're going to do is create a global version of useState. And we're going to call it create state hook. And you call it once, and it gives you back a hook that you can then use in multiple locations, but they all point back to effectively the same data. And it's going to take an initial value, which is going to be of some data type. So this is going to work for anything, and we're going to make it generic. And the result of this is going to be a function, because it's a hook, that returns that tuple. And that tuple is going to have the data type and then a setter. So now let's go and start on implementing it. So the first thing I need is a list of subscribers. I'll say subscribers equals, and then I'm going to use that create subscribable that we just brought in. And then I'm going to return that function. And this is going to be that hook. And then the first thing this hook needs to do is create some state. Because if we don't have useState, then we can't actually get React to understand that that global state may have changed. So I'm going to create some state, call it value and set value. And it's going to be using that initial value, and it's got the data type that we brought in. But now we don't have useState yet, so let's go and import that. And also useEffect. And now we're just going to return that value, as well as a function that takes a new value of that data type. And the first thing that is going to do is call the set value, and then it's going to publish out that new value to anyone else that's listening. So how do we start that listening process? Well, we need to go and do a useEffect. And it's only going to get run once on startup. And then what it's going to do is subscribe. And when that value changes, it's just going to call set value. And the great thing about having our subscribe return a function that unsubscribes is that's exactly the right API signature for useEffect. So when useEffect cleans up, we'll automatically unsubscribe. How cool is that? So in fact, we can simplify this function even further by just removing this return. And now it looks really clean. Okay, so we've got our create state hook. Let's go back over into our app. And I'm just going to remove all of that fun stuff, app and whatnot. So now we need to import that create state hook from our simple state manager. And we're going to use it to create a use counter hook. And it's going to start off with a number, which is at 0. And now let's create a counter component to show the counter and allow you to increment it. So we call use counter and get back the count and also set count. And then we're going to return a div that has a button. It says add one. Classic counter example here. On click, and then we'll go and do set count with the count plus 1. And of course we have to show the count so we know what the count is. And then we need to actually use the counter. All right, let's take a look. Hey, that's pretty good. Of course, we don't really know if it's global or not. I mean, it's a nice counter and all, but like, what happens if we have multiple counters on the page? Let's do that. Let's create 5 counters and see if they all work. That's pretty cool. And I know what you're probably thinking. Jack, you're cheating here. You've got a use state and you're just copying these values between these hooks using that subscribe mechanism. What if I have a massive array that has thousands of items in it? That's crazy. We don't want to do a copy like that every time you have one of these hooks. Having multiple copies of that same array would be expensive and huge and crazy. That's true. That's why you're not going to have multiple copies. UseState doesn't have a copy of your array. It has a reference to your array. And you can make as many references to that array as you want. So when you're passing around that array, you're not actually passing the array, you're just passing the reference. And that's all that useState is actually managing for you. In fact, if you have an array or an object here, anything that's not a primitive type, like a number or a string, it's going to be managed by reference and not by value. Of course, in this case, we're using a number, which will give you copies, but that's okay. Again, in these large data types like large arrays or large objects or arrays of any type and objects of any type, you're going to get a reference and not the value. All right, but you know what? I don't want to leave it there because I think there's another pattern that's related that is super valuable. I've used it a lot, and it's what I call the handlers pattern. And this is where you do have an event subscription system, but the variation is that the subscribers can return a value from the event handler. And when they do, the propagation stops. So basically you have a stack of handlers, and then the first handler that says, yep, I got this, at that point the propagation stops. So we're going to create a new directory called handlers and try this out. Again, I'm going to create my project. I'm going to add TypeScript and TS node. I'm going to do the TSC init. And that's going to give us a handlers directory, which is all set up. Great. Okay, cool. And now I'm going to go copy that create subscribable function because we're going to use that as the basis for our handler stack. So I'm going to create a new file in here called index.ts. And we're going to say create handler stack. And again, we got to do that ES 2015 tweak for our TS config. As well as the DOM. Cool. And now let's take a look at the subscribers again. So currently we're returning void out of this. But what we really want is we want the handler to either be able to say, I have this, meaning it's going to return some data, or I don't have this, and say I return undefined. So we'll just say undefined or an unknown type. And then down in here in publish, this is where the change really happens. So we're going to go through each one of the subscribers in a for loop. And then we're going to have some data. And we're going to start off at unknown. And then we're going to call the subscriber and get back the data. And if the data is not undefined, we're going to break. And then finally, we're going to return that data, which in this case is either going to be, again, undefined or unknown. Okay, so how are we going to actually test this out? Well, let's say we have a directory full of files. Like we got some JSON files, we got some text files. There's a similar thing to what we did in episode 1 where we want to have different handlers, some that handle text files and some that handle JSON files. So I'm going to create a new directory called files. And in it, there's going to be a text file, .txt, and there's going to be a JSON file, .json, message, okay, now because subscribers is a set, we need to do array.from if we want to iterate through that. And now we want to go and create our stack of handlers. So let's go down here and create our handlers. And what do we want to go and send to those handlers? Well, we want to send them the name of the file, which is going to be a string, and we want to send them the contents of the file, which will also be a string. So now we got to go get those files. So let's go back up here to import fs from fs. And we'll go back down here, and we're going to go iterate through the files in that directory. So let's do for, and then we'll say file name of, and then we'll do fs read dir sync, and then give it the directory. So in this case, that's going to be the files directory. And that's going to give us back the names of each one of those files. So let's console log that out and see if that works. There you go. We got our two files. Cool. So now we can go and read the contents of the file. from that file in that directory. And then we're going to go and send it to our handlers. In fact, let's clean this up a little bit. Let's just say that file is name. Make it a little bit easier on ourselves. Very cool. And let's try this again. Now we got nothing because we're not console logging out anything. So let's go and get the output of that. And do console log. And first give the name of the file. And then we'll say the json.stringify of whatever came back from our handlers. So at this point we expect and we get undefined because there are no handlers. There's nobody saying, I got this file. So let's go create a very generic handler that will just handle anything. So I'm going to subscribe, and then I'm going to take the contents of the file, and I'm just going to return it, honestly. Pick that off the end, run it, and there we go. Of course, this JSON is not parsed, so let's go parse that. If we see that we get a JSON, so I'm going to go and put a JSON handler in here now. So it needs the name of the file to see if it wants to parse the file, if it's got a JSON at the end of it. So we'll say if the name ends with .json, then we will instead return the parsed contents. Let's get rid of that trailing parentheses, and away we go. And there we go. So now we've got a chain of handlers. And if the first handler in here says, okay, this is a JSON file, it returns the JSON parsed. Otherwise, it falls back on the more generic handler. And this is just a great pattern if you've got some business logic like that, where you've got a set of rules where if you want to go one way, then there's handlers for that, and you want to go another way, there's handlers for that. And if nothing matches, then you get an undefined at the end. It's really a nice pattern. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you found some value from understanding now the basics of the pub/sub pattern, how to use it in context like that state manager, and also in a special context like this handlers pattern. Of course, if you like this video, be sure to hit that like button. If you really like the video, hit the subscribe button and click on that bell, and you'll be notified the next time a new No BSTS video comes out. And of course, be sure to check out the No BSTS, the book, which is linked to in the description, for a text version of all this information. See you next time.